Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Checkerboard Chat. I'm Ethan Stone, the assistant sports editor here at the Daily Beacon. I've got Josh Lane, sports editor, and Riley Thomas with me. What's up, y'all?
Doing well.
We're doing good. We're hanging in there after a little of a trashy episode on Saturday, but, you know, we live and you learn. We get through it.
Yeah, we're getting better as it goes along,
Yeah.
I think. You know, semester's getting going. I think we're getting to a point where we're getting okay at this podcast stuff. We started a little late, but, you know, that's all right.
The later the better, you know, leaving some mustard stains out there. We're trying to get them out. Might not get them out, but it's okay. Getting hit with a couple of balls here and there, but, you know, you move past those.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good segue.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, the topic this week is, you know, just recapping Ole Miss, recapping, you know, the insanity that happened at the end of that, and then moving into Alabama week. If you could call it a rivalry, I don't know. What would you guys label that?
A one-sided affair, or just, you know, UT just sent some guys out there to go, hey, go play this third Saturday, or it's a fourth Saturday in October this year. Just go play a football game.
Yeah, I think Alabama's looking to make it 15 in a row on the Vols.
15,
they got 14, you know, the past couple times. I mean, Josh Heupel seems to be the guy to break that streak. Josh, what do you think about that?
Maybe not year one, but I think, you know, maybe, who knows, a couple of years in the future. Tennessee, they got some gumption. They're playing with energy now, but I think we're a little ways away. Speaking of energy, let's start out with our recap of Tennessee Ole Miss last Saturday. Tennessee did take a 31-26 loss, but man, oh man, there was a lot of storylines in that game.
Most there ever.
So, I mean, first of all, Matt Corral just running up and down the field on Tennessee. He was approaching near 200 yards on the ground out of the quarterback position. Just Tennessee had no answer. Third down, fourth down, anytime, even in third and long situations, anytime he wanted to, he would just draw right up the middle, go untouched for 15 yards.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating, I feel like, for a Tennessee defense that really played very well.
I agree.
You know, you got a guy like that is just such a generational talent, and you can't even really blame secondary or linebackers too much for it. It's just he's so good at what he does, and he knows, you know, I can bait him, I can do whatever I want back here because I'm just so fast. I'm shifty, I can really put the moves on him. And I mean, Corral led all rushers, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was above his own running back, Henry Parrish, and he was above, obviously, Jabari Small, who had a pretty good day, but you know, when it comes down to it, that was really the storyline of the game, other than, you know, what happened at the end.
What happened afterwards. But, I mean, it is just a bona fide. You just saw Matt Corral was the best player on the field on Saturday. There was no question about it. And, I mean, the crazy part was, he ran for 195. He threw for 231. I mean, Hooker threw for more than he did by 2 more yards. But, I mean, like, the impressive part was just seeing him be so dynamic on the ground. I mean, the whole stadium knew it was coming. I would hope Tennessee defense knew it was coming, the QB run, and they still could not stop it. And then the plays where he couldn't find anybody open, and then he would just make it happen, just get, 8 yards, whatever it took to get the first down.
Yeah, and, I mean, I may be slightly off on this, but, you know, while we're covering the game, I lean over to Josh, and I think it was about halfway through, maybe a little bit in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. And I think by game's end, Matt Corral had 10 of Ole Miss's 13 third and fourth down conversions. Yeah. Wow, that's a mouthful. But, I mean, that's really telling, though. Like, on third and fourth down especially, he was just obliterating the Vols on defense. And that's just got to be frustrating for a guy like Heupel.
And, I mean, the passing attack, he did fine. I mean, he really didn't impress me. He missed some throws, and now, granted, some guys did drop some touchdowns, so that did help. But, I mean, you just see why he is a perennial Heisman candidate behind Bryce Young. Him and him were neck and neck. Just the dynamic guy that he is, on the ground, through the air. You can see why. What's crazy is he was a backup at Ole Miss before Lane Kiffin got there. And then now he's a Heisman frontrunner. He speaks to Lane Kiffin and the growth from last year, 14 interceptions, to now. We forced the first interception of the season against him. We can take that to the grave. But, he is a dynamic player, no question.
Yeah, so Corral, first drive of the game. Tennessee, forces an Ole Miss punt, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So, right off the bat, you kind of setting yourself up for success, maybe thinking, all right, our defense has been playing well all year. Maybe something changes this game. Maybe we'll get to Corral. But Ole Miss punts, Velus Jones Jr. back to receive it. He's inside the 5 or wherever it was, drops the punt, muffs it, Ole Miss recovers. They score pretty quick after. And that just kind of set the tone for the game. Tennessee was playing from behind for the rest of the game. Corral was running all over the place. It was close enough to where you thought Tennessee had a chance there, maybe a couple plays away, but it just felt like Ole Miss was kind of in the driver's seat for most of it up until kind of late in the fourth quarter, and that's where things started to get crazy. Tennessee was driving there to end the third, start out the fourth quarter with a touchdown to pull it within the final score. They're within 5 points of Ole Miss, and neither team scoring much, and then Tennessee gets the ball back about midway through the quarter. I guess it was a little later than midway because there's about, 2 minutes left or whatever. And it sets up that 4th and 24 play. You're driving, you get to midfield, and penalties and a sack, I believe it was, and you're back 4th and long. Hooker finds Jacob Warren over the middle, comes up 23 yards, just a yard short. Yeah. There's that spot, and it's hard to tell, man. I don't know how many times I've watched that video, and sometimes I was like, oh, maybe he got it, and sometimes I think he's short, and you can't really. It's hard with the refs being where they are, and they're not as fast as Jacob Warren. They're gonna have to make the spot from where behind. They're not gonna be parallel with him or whatever. So it's a tough spot, and man, that leads to some chaos, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and you can make the argument all you want, but when it comes down to it, where they spotted the ball was paramount to that decision. If they had spotted the ball at the 40-yard line or wherever it was, the line of gain, I believe it was the 40, but if they spot it at the line of gain, that's a first down. They wouldn't be able to overturn it. The major thing is the camera angle they had on the ball, or the lack of, where we could see the ball, that's ultimately what did Jacob Warren in. Yeah. Me personally, I don't know. I'll die on the hill that I think he made it, but there's no way to tell. No. So they made the right call. It was the right call because within the parameters of what they're allowed to do, they I think did it correctly.
Yeah, and I mean the tough part is, like you said, you don't have the camera angle. From the angle that we did see, his right arm does extend, but the ball is not in his hands in that scenario. And what's crazy is, I don't know if you all watched the Monday night game for the Titans and the Bills, that play where Josh Allen jumped over that guy. They had that literally a camera on the first down marker, and I'm like, where was that 2 days ago?
That would have been a perfect.
Perfect.
The SEC has $250,000 extra now.
They do.
ESPN
just being
so maybe they will now.
ESPN just being cheapskates as they are. It's just like, how can you not put a camera right there for that scenario?
That would be a good idea.
The whole game was just full of just mishaps. I mean, SEC, they're saying is it just means more. Talk about the best conference in the league, but you got these refs that mess up every single week.
Yeah.
How can you call Matt Corral forward progress stopped? I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And my thing is too, those refs, they screwed up Mississippi State in the Memphis game this year with that punt. Last year they screwed up Arkansas Auburn. These refs have caused issues for a different team every single week. If I'm Greg Sankey, you got to step up and take some kind of you got to step up and just make some changes here, man. Like, this is too much. You cannot let these guys control the game.
Yeah, and I don't even think this is necessarily at this point coming from just a Tennessee perspective. There were several times throughout the game that Ole Miss got the same treatment, just a wrong call. Let's just call it how it is. Yeah. The Tyler Barron thing in the first quarter, first half. It was the first half, and there's just no reason on earth that should not have been a scoop and score for Tennessee. That should have been 7 because what Ole Miss was trying to do, I believe, I'm not Lane Kiffin, but what I think he was trying to do was a fake play. I think he tried to hand it off, do the old hidden ball trick, and the quarterback, Matt Corral, he just sold it. He acted like he was like, false start or something. He was trying to get out of it because he realized what had happened. Tyler Barron and whoever else was there,
Matthew Butler,
maybe. They're just smart enough to know this is still a live play going on here. Yeah. Like, they're not going to get fooled by that. They rip the ball out, run it back, and it's like forward progress could not have been called because he didn't move. He didn't move he didn't go backwards. He didn't go forward. He didn't move a muscle.
And the refs followed him the entire play to the continuation. Yep. Didn't call a single thing either. No whistle was blown.
See, there's just little stuff like that. And I was telling Josh earlier, football is a dynamic game, and it's a game of chaos. Yeah. If that had happened, it would have been a completely different game. And that doesn't necessarily mean Tennessee's going to win. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's even going to be close. Who knows? Tennessee could have taken off from that point. Or maybe that's the only score of the game for the Vols. It's just one thing leads to another, that kind of butterfly effect, I guess. But when it comes down to it, that would not have hurt the Vols in that moment. and likely it would have given them some momentum going forward.
Yeah, so you have that call, and I mean, Tennessee fans have had years and years of that kind of mess. Just calls going against them and whatever, and even kind of this season too. But you have that call early in the game, and then there's other ones, and then you have the Jacob Warren one at the end, and that's kind of the tipping point for fans.
Yeah.
And that's when everything starts going crazy. Fans, and as we've come to find out right in that story, maybe Ole Miss fans started it first in celebration, but they're throwing bottles and trash on the field at the band or whatever. And then Tennessee fans, maybe they don't realize exactly what's going on. They're joining in, especially after the call was reviewed and upheld. Then that's when they're really protesting the game. They're throwing stuff, trash. I mean, there's that mustard bottle. That's why we dubbed it the mustard bowl. That picture of the random mustard bottle on the field that went viral. A golf ball hits Lane Kiffin. I mean, they're just throwing everything. It was just chaos. The game's so late for 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the article we're referencing, we just came out with it today. UTKDailyBeacon.com. Mustard bowl. Chaos causes what do we call it? The
controversial
call causes chaos. Yeah, there we go. I don't know the title of my own article, but regardless, just what we're talking about here, like, it doesn't matter too much who started it. That's just that's what our thing was about. But it doesn't matter too much who started it. It's not a great look either way, but to act like other schools and other organizations have not done this for not just the past couple years, forever. Since sport has existed, people have gotten angry and felt that their team was wronged. And obviously, that's just, no official met at at midfield before the game and said, we are going to make Tennessee lose this game. Right. That's not how it works. No. And if you believe that way, you're kidding yourself. There could be some bias. That I can definitely believe that. But to act like the fix is in or something like that, I don't know. I don't assign myself to that line of thinking.
I just just go and look at it. Some guy literally went to the hot dog stand and grabbed the mustard ball. That's how that happens. And then some other person brought in a golf ball. Like, how do they get a golf ball? Or like, what in their right mind? Like, hey, I'm bringing a golf ball.
Yeah.
I will say, at least you didn't throw like a Pro V1 at Lane Kiffin. He threw like a crappy little practice ball. That was a good thing about it. But I wasn't, I was at the game, I was watching it, and I didn't want to believe it was actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
I was just looking at it. I was like, are they actually throwing things at, people? And then from my vantage point, so I was sitting behind the Ole Miss band, and there were people throwing, water bottles on them.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I'm getting a little, frustrated. I'm like, I got to get out of here. This is just not, when I saw the band, the cheerleaders go off into the tunnel, I'm like, man. This is getting out of hand. This is just a safety concern. Now, granted, I'm not condoning anybody to do this, but the people that did do it, that's a very small minority for the UT fans, and I just don't appreciate the national media voice crack. That was bad. Goodness gracious. I didn't think I hadn't hit puberty yet. But I don't appreciate the national media dogging. I just don't get it. They just trying to get an excuse to just make us look bad. That's just what I'm getting.
And that's exactly what Josh Heupel was talking about after the game, and I guess even Monday too, was the atmosphere for 59 minutes of the game, and 99% of the fans was incredible, was electric. Everything they wanted it to be. They had Checker kneeling there. I think I saw they broke their decibel record there at 120 or whatever it was. So the fans were loud, they were paying attention, they were energetic, they were enjoying the game the whole time. And just, all these factors, and, if they're a fault or what, we're not going to condemn, what's the word?
Well, I think
both will work.
Both of them do
work.
I
think both will work.
Anyways,
keep cooking.
Yeah, we're not saying they're without fault, but I don't know. It's a small percentage of the fan, and that's what they're saying. It takes away ultimately from the story of the game. Is that Tennessee was really, they played a great game, and they were really just a couple plays away from beating Ole Miss.
See, if Tennessee wins that game, do you guys think that this is still at the national level it is, or do you think it's even more so? Do you think national media is entitled Tennessee fans can't even take a win? What?
You mean if Tillman would have caught that pass at the end there?
If Tillman catches that pass, which, by the way, That actually, I mean, I don't want to be placing blame on anyone. It's very hard to be a student athlete, so don't take this wrong. That actually was a great throw by Joe.
It was.
It was a fantastic
There was
throw
nobody
by Joe.
open. They were playing prevent, literally just hanging at the goal line, and he finds Tillman somehow. A great throw.
Tillman actually jumped a little early. If he had timed his jump better, that might have been
probably
six.
A touchdown.
That
might football game.
That might have been a Tennessee victory. You know, we're talking Tennessee sitting 5-2.
It probably overshadows it just a little bit, but not to the entirety. I mean, yes, Tennessee would have come out with the victory, but I still do think that the trash would have overshadowed the victory, sadly. That's what it would come to. But I do think it would help a little bit, but I think since throwing stuff on the field doesn't happen as much compared to a game-winning touchdown, I think that will take the national media attention over the win. But like, the headline would be like, Tennessee wins, but in a trashy way or something like that. So you know what I mean? Like it just, something like that would happen.
Yeah. So anyways, there's a delay going on. It's 20 minutes. Once, all the bands have cleared out, like half the student section has been cleared out. They've moved Ole Miss from the middle of the field back to the sideline because it's safe for them to be at the sideline. Ole Miss has a ball, and everyone figures there's, a minute left, maybe a little less than a minute.
54 seconds, I think.
54 seconds.
This game's over. And then Tennessee's defense comes out with the stop. They stop. They force a punt. I guess they had all three timeouts at that point. And they force a punt and get the ball back. And then I think second play of that next drive, Hendon Hooker gets hurt on that run.
Yeah.
And that's because you think Tennessee's got a chance. They got Hooker the ball, and then he gets hurt on that run.
Yeah.
And then, Joe Milton's going to have to come in. And we know what Joe Milton's done this year. And it's, overthrows and all this inconsistency. But he's got the talent. And then, again, like we mentioned, they were 2 plays away. He overthrew Tillman, or maybe he didn't even overthrow Tillman. Yeah. Tillman maybe missed the catch by just a little bit. And then there's that scramble, and he ran out of bounds on the last play. That was a bit of a questionable play, but I mean, anyway, in the end, you're 2 plays away from upsetting Ole Miss with even your backup quarterback who made a good throw when he needed to.
Yeah, I mean the takeaways from this game, if the trash doesn't happen, I think are mostly positive. I mean, Tennessee loses that game, sure. Fan base is very upset, and there's the officials, there's the calls. Whatever you want to say. If you want to look on the positive side, though, that was the lowest score Ole Miss had all year.
Yeah.
They hadn't been below 40. They had not been held below 40. They were averaging 46 points going into the game.
Yeah.
And just an elite offense. And for Tim Banks and company on defense to be able to stop that, to get a safety for the first time since 2015, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And
first pick on Corral.
On Matt Corral, Heisman candidate. Just all this little stuff that, and then holding them right there with 54 seconds left. You think the game's over?
Yeah. They just need a first down.
All they need is a first down. And the game's over. And
run Corral for 10 yards.
It's Lane Kiffin and Matt Corral. This power duo, and you're stopping them, and then you're getting the ball back, putting yourself in a position to win. That is just not what would have happened a year or two ago.
No.
You get in that position with past administrations, and you probably let them score.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, seriously.
The defense probably lets them score, and then they put the game away, and you chalk it off as, we'll get them next time. But this time, when you say you'll get them next time, if it wasn't Alabama, you'd legitimately believe that.
You legit, yeah. Because back to your point of the defense, they balled out.
Mm-hmm.
They literally, so Ole Miss ran 101 plays with a 510 yards. To say you held Ole Miss to 5 yards a play with that offense that has the firepower it does and just the ability to make these huge plays, they kept them under wraps. Now, granted, there were a couple of drop touchdowns, but still, they were within that game. They were within a score or two within the entire ball. That's all you can ask for with that defense. That is hurt, guys out there. Depth, to me, now is just the issue of Tennessee. And that is evident with all these injuries out there. And even with all the depth issues and injuries, they performed at a high level.
Yeah, you got to remember missing a pretty decent chunk of the offensive line. Yeah. Cade Mays is out. Best offensive lineman probably. I believe it was Cooper Mays that was the other one that was out. You're missing Tyan Evans, who was a game time decision. Mm-hmm. You're missing, it doesn't mean a huge amount, but Hooker at the very end.
Right.
If Hooker's in, do you win that game? I mean, it's possible. You get Hooker with 3 throws at the end zone. Instead of Milton, running out of bounds. Right. But I don't want to talk too much about that. That was just, that's neither
It
here
was a
nor there.
perfect
What
way to end
happened.
the game, honestly.
Perfect way to end the game. And
Got the first down.
Yeah.
But, when it comes down to with all those injuries in Tennessee to be, competing in that manner, and I don't even want to sound like I'm, go team, go them, this is a moral victory or something. Right. It's, Tennessee fans have stuff to be excited about, legitimately, even in a losing effort.
That was a top 15 team, and you lost to them by 5 points. Mm-hmm. And you held them to, 31 points, 501 yards, whatever it might have been. Yeah.
Yeah. And
you got to come out of the way. You can come out of the way, like you said, moral victories, no one likes those. But if you want one, to me, that is one. In year one, you're doing that. That, to me, is a moral victory.
Yeah, and you got, a perfect opportunity coming up. You're going to Alabama next week. You got a bye, and then Kentucky after that, and then you got Georgia. Yeah. And, those are 3 ranked teams all in a row, and then, Vandy and South Alabama to end the season. But, I feel like that's a pretty good segue to just start talking about what's up next for Tennessee. And the answer to that is another Heisman candidate quarterback. Can you believe it?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about our own quarterback player for a minute. And neither one of them are Heisman candidates. Sorry.
Sadly.
It is what it is. So obviously Hooker goes down with a leg injury. Heupel never said if it was knee or ankle. It's a leg injury.
Yeah.
We thought it might be kind of severe. Like when he first came out of the game, it looked like one of those where maybe that's a potential season ender. It looked bad, but he comes back, and on Monday, Josh Heupel says, Hendon Hooker's day-to-day. It's not as bad as we thought. So that's positive news for Tennessee because Hooker has been one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. That's great news for them that he's not out for the rest of the season. But he's probably not going to play against Alabama. I don't see any reason why, with him being questionable, you start Hendon Hooker against Alabama. So that means, well, I guess there's an option there for Josh Heupel. He's got Joe Milton, who was your opening day starter, won the job against Bowling Green, and then through injuries and underperformance, lost it out to Hendon Hooker. And then even on the bench, your third stringer is Harrison Bailey. He has played one game in garbage time this year.
Yeah.
I mean, basically had no playing time since last season. So what does Josh Heupel do at quarterback? I mean, it's Alabama. Do you just say, Hooker, we got a bye week coming up, just get through this game? Or do you say, all right, we're trying to wait, we're trying to recover, get to this bye week, get to Kentucky, start Joe Milton? Or is Harrison Bailey even on the table? Ethan, your thoughts?
Yeah, so, Hooker should be off the table, in my opinion. If I was Josh Heupel, and there's plenty of reasons why I'm not Josh Heupel, but if I was Josh Heupel, Hendon Hooker is not seeing the field. Yeah. For one, he's not going to be healthy enough. He says day to day, but that doesn't mean anything. That injury looked very bad, and it's good news that it's not going to be season ending. I believe that, but I'm not 100% sure I buy that. Hooker could be ready this Saturday. Even if he is, Hendon Hooker should not touch the field in this game against Alabama. It's just, there's bigger things in the future that Hooker is, going to be needed for. And so I don't even think that's an option personally. So your second option, knowing Heupel, it's most likely going to be Joe Milton. And, that's not exactly a bad thing to put all your chips in on. He has experience against these big schools. He's had his consistency problems this year, but like we said earlier, he had a throw that put Tennessee in a position to win against Ole Miss. So you gotta just throw him out there, say you have complete confidence in him, and just let him loose, see what he can do.
Yeah. I'm gonna tend to agree with you. Obviously, if we had the slightest bit for some reason to beat Alabama, you play Hooker, but since we don't. Since Tennessee does not, at this point, you need to rest him because the bye week's coming up, sit him for 2 weeks. Because we don't even know how much he's practiced this week. To me, that means a lot, too.
Very little, I think. I think Heupel said today he's maybe in the last day or so he's gotten a few reps, but I don't think it's anything much.
Yeah, so, that should speak volumes into how little Heupel is just trying to, get him healthy again. You gotta chalk this one up as Alabama. It's sadly probably going to be a loss. They're just too good. Our injuries have hurt us, the depth issues, and we were playing at a high level with what we have at this point. But it is just, I just don't see how Tennessee can compete against Bama.
See, and I just want to jump in here. Obviously, I like the way we're going, but man, you talk about Tennessee not going into this game chalking it up as a loss. You know, there's fans that could be out there saying, you know, I don't know, man, you just rest Hooker because Alabama's just going to be a loss, and I can definitely understand that sentiment, but if you think for a second these players are thinking that, I mean, I'm not saying you are personally, but if fans from Tennessee think for a second that Josh Heupel is just chalking this up as a loss, you are sadly mistaken. In past administrations, maybe so, but Josh Heupel's going into it to win this game. You know it.
I agree with you there. They're definitely not, but I hope in the back of his mind he's also thinking about the future.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he can use this game as to help out Milton potentially just for other scenarios. Obviously, Hooker is the guy. You just don't want to get him any more hurt than he already is. Because, like you said, that injury looked a lot worse than what Heupel was claiming it out to be, which is great news. But who's to say Alabama won't hurt him even more on it? You know, it just, you don't know.
Yeah, I think Heupel is a smart enough dude, and he thinks ahead enough. That much I think he's shown that he knows, you know, there's a chance in other ways that Tennessee can do this. And he'll game plan for that.
Yeah.
Tyon Evans is likely going to be back. We don't know that for sure. But if he's a game-time decision against Ole Miss, then he's likely going to be back against Alabama. And so you better know that Tennessee is going to be just going against their front seven.
Yeah.
And obviously, Bama, you know, their defense is not quite top in the nation, but it's nearing that elite level for sure, as it always is. And so Heupel's going to have a game plan going in. I think it'll be outside the box. You know, you just never know. And you know, you can watch the ESPN projections, you can watch that sort of stuff, but none of that matters to Josh Heupel.
No, in the end, he gets it. Tennessee's over halfway through his schedule, haven't had this bye week yet. Now you got an injured quarterback, and Heupel's already called the team many times like the thinnest roster in America.
Yeah.
He gets where we're at injury-wise. So he's going to be precautious, like Ethan said. He's going to be scheming up. He always is, always creative. They're going to find other ways to come out and be competitive. But they're at this point, especially regarding Hendon Hooker, I think they're going to be valuing player safety and health.
One quick thing for those that want Harrison Bailey, I hope that he plays so you all can shut up about him wanting to get in there. He is the third string for a reason. I hate the people that go on sports radio and say clamoring for him to play, for him to start because he's the most accurate passer, because he threw for a 75 completion percentage last year. Well, that was last year. This is this year. He's third string for a reason. I hope he plays, and I hope he does great. Whatever. But I would love to hear your all's excuses come Monday morning if he does get in there and Alabama just dogs him.
Riley is telling it how it is.
Yeah, I know. I'm just speaking from my heart. The best two are Hendon Hooker and Milton because of what they bring to the table. They fit the offense better. Bailey does not. Simple as that.
See, and Harrison Bailey definitely has that talent. That's the thing.
Yes, I'm not denying his talent. He just doesn't fit the offense.
That's the thing is people. Jeremy Pruitt and Josh Heupel have different systems. Yes. That much I think we can all agree 100%. With. Heupel's the one putting up the points. He's the one going out there being fast. And Harrison Bailey is a great quarterback, but he's a pro-style quarterback. Yes. So when it comes down to it, I think he has the potential to do well in the system. I do. I think he has the arm, but that doesn't mean that right now he is the guy for it. And, he could go out there against Alabama and he could kill it. I could definitely see it because the guy has the raw talent. Yeah. But Joe Milton, Hendon Hooker, at this moment, they just give Tennessee the better options. So when there's people, on Twitter, on social media saying that Harrison Bailey is the guy, it's like, yes, he is the guy for Pitt. He is the guy. He is the guy for South Carolina. South Carolina would love Harrison Bailey.
Oh God, they would love him.
And what's on their school? Mississippi State would love Harrison
the air raid
Bailey
system,
right now.
Yes,
and just Tennessee just isn't quite right there in that moment right now. So I'd be interested to see what he could do because on the same side of the coin, he hasn't exactly had a shot. He's had garbage time this season, so you just never know. He could prove one person wrong one way or the other. But when it comes down to it, I think I share Riley's sentiment in a more, I guess. How do I put this? Quiet, but softer way. That Harrison Bailey, he has the talent, but when it comes down to it, I'm just not sure he's the guy that can go out there and do it against Alabama like Joe Milton.
Some numbers here. One game, garbage time blowout, as you mentioned. Harrison Bailey completed 3 passes for 16 yards. Joe Milton, 46%, 255 yards, 1 touchdown. Mm-hmm. So neither one is blowing you away.
No.
Neither one has really had much of a chance since Hooker stepped up, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah, see, I can also, I forgot to add this, I'll let you keep going afterwards, but I can very well see a possibility where Heupel rolls them both out at some point.
Yeah.
I really
Might as
could.
well.
I mean,
He's mentioned the two quarterbacks system.
he did earlier in the season, and obviously Heupel doesn't hate Bailey. He knows his talent. He knows what he has there at that slot. I guess he's the third string, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't know how to use him. So especially this far in the season, especially getting to know Harrison, getting to know his play style, I feel like this is the game that I could see Heupel kind of rolling out something like that, just to see where we're at, just to see what he can do, just to give him that valid chance when Hooker is out.
At this point, just throw anything at them and see if they can stop it.
Yeah. I mean, that's,
honestly,
like I said earlier about football being about chaos. Yeah. That's kind of what's got to happen.
I mean, Heupel this week could be just playing some brain games with Saban, saying that Hooker's day to day, but it could be whatever. Another thing quick about Hooker. With his running ability and the leg injury, you wonder how much, if he does end up playing, how little he would run. So that's why I kind of hope he doesn't play, because he brings that to the table. And if he does run, it just takes one bad tackle and just one bad step.
Yeah. So definitely plenty of questions there for Josh Heupel. He obviously knows what he's doing. He's a football coach for a reason. We are sitting in a room doing a podcast for a reason. So not to dog on us, but Heupel will make the right call, I'm sure. So speaking of quarterbacks, when you look at Alabama, their star player this year has been Bryce Young. As a freshman, and I forgot this, one of the top, maybe even the top recruit of his class, goes to Alabama and sits on the bench under Mac Jones, comes out this year, his sophomore year, and is probably the leading Heisman. It depends on who you ask, but he's probably the leading Heisman candidate. I think odds, him and Corral are pretty close, but some places have Young ahead. But Young, let's see some numbers on him: 69% completion percentage, over 2,000 yards, 24 passing touchdowns. I think that's third in the country. So he has just been dynamic dynamic, incredible, whatever word you want to use on offense. But we mentioned the Heisman candidacy. We saw Matt Corral last week. He's probably the 1B to Young at 1A. So is Young still? I mean, we'll see him Saturday. So maybe this will be a better question for next week. But is Young your leading Heisman candidate right now? Did Corral, what did you see from him? Does that affect your answer at all?
See, I've watched Alabama games this year, obviously. I'm kind of a college football junkie when it comes to that stuff. And not to take anything away from the guy, he is a fantastic football player. I mean, that I think goes without saying. I'm not sure he quite stacks up to the Alabama quarterbacks of the past. And like I said, that's a heck of a thing to be put in. Okay. He's been a good quarterback this year, but when you compare him to the Mac Jones, when Jalen Hurts was there, when Tua Tagovailoa was there, he puts Alabama in positions to win, but I'm just not sure that, he's a freshman. He makes mistakes. I'm not sure he is in that conversation as Corral, just because I think Corral has the experience on him. I think Corral is better with his legs, and Corral just has a cannon, for an arm. Bryce Young is a top 3 quarterback in the nation. That much I can say without a shadow of a doubt. But in my opinion, I think Corral kind of runs away with it. Josh is trying to destroy the studio here. But
I almost knocked over a tripod. That's my fault.
But yeah, to keep going anyway, Bryce Young, fantastic athlete. He's going to give Tennessee some trouble. But I think Tennessee is on the back end of their campaign against Heisman quarterbacks. You got Kenny Pickett a while ago too, and he might not be number 2 or number 3 on the list, but he's top 5 too. Yeah. So Tennessee is definitely playing all the guys.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you there a little bit, Ethan. I don't know. I think Bryce Young is better. Now, granted, Matt Corral does run better. I get that part. But I just think from a pure quarterback passer, I think Bryce Young is above the rest, in my opinion. He, last week, Mississippi State, 348, 4 touchdowns. And in the loss, threw for 369, 3 touchdowns. Last week against Ole Miss, Corral only threw for 231. He did miss some throws that I've seen. I just think Bryce Young is a better overall passer. I will give the athlete perspective to Corral clearly. Now, Corral's had better passing games than what he did last week, but I think I go from consistency basis. I like Young from that perspective. And I know you said about Jalen Hurts. Obviously, his passer developed at Oklahoma. I think Young is a better passer than he was his first 2 years at Alabama than Jalen Hurts ever was at Alabama. Oklahoma, different story, but to me, I'm going to lean towards Bryce Young as of now. Obviously, Corral could change that opinion when he plays later in the season, and on Saturday, Young could, for whatever reason, we could somehow stop him. I don't know, but I think Bryce Young is, to me, the Heisman candidate, the Heisman front runner. I think he's a better passer.
Yeah, I'm a little torn because after last week, Corral was just so good, and like Ethan mentioned, he's got the added bonus of he can run, and if the Heisman candidate or if the Heisman is just goes to the best player in college football, it's hard to deny. There's 8 touchdowns he has on the ground, 2 in addition, but I don't know. I think I might be leaning Young right now. We'll see what happens Saturday and then just through the rest of the year. We're halfway through, so it's still early, but it's kind of a coin flip. I don't think you can go wrong with either pick at this point. But let's keep talking Alabama. Their offense, it looks a little different this year, and maybe not as explosive as what people are used to with Bill O'Brien now. It's very traditional, a bit more conservative style of offense, but that's not stopping Bryce Young and them from having plenty of success. I count 11 players on Alabama's offense with a touchdown from scrimmage, 11 players, and 7 of them have multiple. Now that's some teams, a lot of teams would dream to have that many players with that many touchdowns. So, what does Tennessee have to do to stop this offense? I know, like we mentioned, they're not maybe as explosive as they were, but is there anything they can do to kind of get to Bryce Young and kind of limit that group?
Yeah, I think the big thing that Tennessee needs to do is just control the big play from happening as much as possible. Obviously, Bryce Young will love to take the deep shots, the deep throws. I just think if they can, and then also the good thing now, this could change on Saturday. Bryce Young has only ran for -2 yards on the season. So now, granted, obviously Alabama could do some scouting, see that Tennessee has given up a lot of yards to Emory Jones and Matt Corral in the quarterback running department. So that could obviously change, but you have that going in. Bryce Young, yes, he can run, but he may not be that threat as them two were. So you may not have to worry about it as much. So UT can kind of back off a little bit, just playing coverage, play down a lot of scrimmage because obviously Alabama will want to run the football clearly, but just contain the big play, force turnovers. Matt Corral's already thrown 3 on the season. I saw you said in the rundown they've had how many fumbles this year?
Alabama has lost 6 fumbles this year.
Right, so they're not like they're not like they're Thanos or something and don't have any they're not invincible. They are real. They do come to earth at some points, create turnovers. Simple as that. You saw Tennessee create turnovers on Saturday. Had a chance to beat Ole Miss. I'm not saying if they do that, they can beat Alabama, but just disrupt them a little bit. Get some pressure. Contain them as much as possible. And just don't get hurt. For goodness sakes, don't get hurt anymore.
Yeah, and Alabama has, I think the thing that kind of puts Corral, and I promise I'm going somewhere with this, the thing that puts Corral over Young, or right now, I think, is just his receivers are not as good as Alabama's. Alabama has weapons at receiver.
I'll give you that.
And so kind of my segue where I'm going with this is Tennessee secondary played great against Ole Miss. That was a fantastic game.
Yeah.
To continue that success going forward, to stop Alabama's offense, that secondary is going to have to work.
Yeah.
They play, you can say top 2 in Heisman candidate last week against Ole Miss, and they had their hands full stopping that. But this week, I think they have even more of a challenge just because the talent they're going up against at wide receiver is pretty shocking, honestly. When you put it out, you got Metch, you got Jamison Williams, who leads them in touchdown catches this year. I think he has 6, which is a dumb number in 8 games. And they got so many guys there that can catch the ball, yards after catch, that can really add to that explosive gene, I guess, that Alabama really has going for them. I'm not sure that their running game is quite what it was. Brian Robinson is obviously an elite runner. He knows, how to run you over. He can punish you, but their rushing game is not where Alabama gets it done. It's through the air that Alabama is going to be able to get you. And Tennessee's secondary, which hasn't played fantastic this year and that really stepped up last week, is going to have to do it again if this is going to be competitive.
I mean, I know you said Brian Robinson, it's not the Alabama, it's not Mark Ingram, Najee Harris of last year. He still has 614 yards on the ground and 8 touchdowns. So it averages about 5 yards a carry, so they still can ground and pound you. Yeah. It's not the Alabama of 10 years ago, but they're still a threat. Obviously, they have evolved into their deep passing threat. Bryce Young, Mechie, all those guys you just mentioned.
See, I think Josh brought up a good point before we started talking about this. Bill O'Brien being in that system
that changes
really kind of changes stuff because O'Brien has always been a guy that kind of wants to just chuck the ball all over the place. He's a little more conservative, when it comes down to play calling, but he's always been that pass first type of guy. And I think that's, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure about that with a guy like Brian Robinson on the bench, because, not on the bench, but like
in the backfield.
Kind of what I said earlier, like Robinson, it kind of sounded like I was saying that they don't have a rushing attack. They do, they just don't use it the way they use their receivers. So I think it's going to be more important in the secondary stopping them than it will be with the front seven, because that's just not what they go to first, even though I sound dumb because Robinson has 8 touchdowns on the season. And that really just shows, though, you can go after one thing on defense. You can say this is where they're going to get us, and they'll just get you in another way.
Exactly.
I mean, they have a elite offense, and it doesn't matter who you're playing. If they have an elite offense, like Ole Miss showed last week, they're going to be able to put up points.
Right.
So you kind of got to mitigate the damage rather than say we're going to stop Brian Robinson, we're going to stop Jamison, stuff like that.
The great minds like that just find a way. That's all it is.
Yeah. For me, when I look at any chance that Tennessee's going to have to have success against Ole Miss, it's gonna come in the red zone. It's gonna come in stopping Alabama's red zone offense in the red zone. And I can't find the exact numbers. I'm slow to pull this up, but I think Alabama's probably near perfect in its red zone. Here we go, 32 for 35. Well, that's opponent. So they're 16 for 18 in the red zone. No, just kidding. It was 32 to 35. 32 out of 35 times Alabama gets in the red zone, they score. On the other side of that, when you look at Tennessee's defense, let's see, they have allowed a score. And I'm struggling through this. They've allowed a score in 21 of 23 times.
Wow.
So Pitt was 7 for 7, Florida was 5 for 5, Ole Miss 4 for 4. I think their only 2 stops were both against South Carolina.
Yeah.
So when a team gets in the red zone against Tennessee, they're going to score. And then you put a team like Alabama, and it only gets worse. So any chance of success, it's going to have to be in kind of limiting those red zones. And I don't know if Tennessee's going to be able to do it. I just from a talent level, I don't know that they're quite there yet.
Yeah.
But that's my key.
Yeah, Tennessee has really been the opposite of a bend don't break defense.
Yeah.
I follow a couple teams in the NFL that are completely opposite of that. They are bend don't break, and they stop you in the red zone. But Tennessee, I mean, that is a shocking stat that 21 out of 23 times there has been a score. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Their defense, it either punches you in the mouth. It doesn't create too many turnovers, but it's either kind of 3 and out or they're going to score. Like when they get going and they get tired and just all that stuff, I feel like Tim Banks has especially put some emphasis on going out there and hitting them in the mouth when you can. And that shows the first play of the first drive of the Ole Miss game. I think they went 3 and out. Am I correct that they went 3 and out?
They
and then
had one first down.
They might have gotten one first down.
Though, so
I mean,
it was basically a win.
They had one of the best offenses in the nation
Exactly.
punting. I may have been wrong about the 3 and out, but yes, they have the one of the better offenses punting. And then Velus Jones drops the ball, and then. When you have a short field like that, you can't really blame him. You can't really blame him at that point.
No.
And so, I don't know. That's still just a pretty shocking number, 21 of 23. Yeah. So, I don't know. That's obviously going to have to get better. You can say that it's the opposite of a bend don't break, but you can't have that against the Kentuckys, against the Georgias, Bamas of the world.
And I mean, field goals, if you can get that, that's a win. Mm-hmm. If you can hold them to 3 or nothing, 3 or less, that's a win. Obviously, touchdown, not that good. But if they can somehow contain them from just getting into the end zone, that is a win.
Yeah. I think field goals were counting in that stat, so maybe it's a little, but I mean, still to your point, they're gonna have to limit that those red zone opportunities. But let's kind of look at Alabama's year in general. I mean, they're sitting 6-1 and number 4 in the country, and how many teams would love to be in that spot right now? But from an outside perspective, someone that's not covering Alabama within the program and all, it kind of seems like it's a down year for them, right? They started number 1, or they were up to number 1 at one point. I mean, do you think it's a fair assessment to say that this is a down year for Alabama? Is that just our standards are so high? Does that speak to what they've done in the past? I mean,
yeah. So Nick Saban actually said a little while ago, he was like, I don't think we are being within the locker room. I don't think we call ourselves elite anymore. And people rolled their eyes at that, and I was one of them included that rolled my eyes at that. It's like, Nick, you are a top 5 team in the country. You lost to A&M, but stuff like that happens when you're in College Station. Like, they're just crazy down there. Yeah. So you play a team like A&M that had legitimate talent coming into the season. They've had their share of struggles, but they have the talent. That's not as awful of a loss as it seems on paper, but that doesn't mean that Alabama doesn't normally whip them, every year in, year out. So to say it's a down year, that's a weird phrasing, but it's something close to a down year. I'm not sure it's necessarily they're not playing up to their potential, but they usually win those games, and that's something to be noticed.
I mean, I think it's just a different year because they've lost so many big names, and Tua and Devontae Smith, Mac Jones, Heisman winner last year, Devontae Smith, like I just said. You've got different guys they're getting used to. Obviously, Mechie, you knew Bryce Young, but their defense this year has been tested, and that's not a Nick Saban, thing through and through. And also this year, they're not the best team in the SEC. That doesn't happen too often. So I think that's another reason why some people are kind of, I wouldn't say off them, but kind of looking past them. And I wouldn't do that because they got Nick Saban, who's won 8 natties. It's just, I wouldn't put it as a down year. I think that they've just kind of taken a step back, like, whoa, we just lost, let's regroup, and I think they'll be just fine.
Yeah, and, I mean, this might be a little hypothetical, I guess, but I think not having Clemson in the picture kind of has some people like, oh, what's, Alabama's not undefeated, and it's because that intrinsic rivalry between Alabama and Clemson just isn't there right now, so they're trying to find other teams to compare Alabama to. Yeah. And, it might sound like I'm kind of talking in circles, but you got Georgia, who's a legitimate, really, really good team and better than Alabama. Yes. And so you don't have that conversation going of, is Bama better, is Clemson better, when, let's be honest, Bama's the second best team in the country. Like, they're ranked number 4. If you put them up against just about anybody except for Georgia, I think they beat them right now. Now, they're number 4 because they lost to Texas A&M.
Sure.
And like I said earlier, Texas A&M, they had the talent. They have had their share of struggles, but they have the talent to beat a team like Alabama, especially in a place like Kyle Field. And I don't know if you've been to Kyle Field. Apart from Neyland and maybe Penn State in a whiteout, that is just the most brutal atmosphere to play in. I guarantee it. Yeah. They are borderline insane down there. It's just a bizarre experience going down there. And so, I mean, this sounds weird, but it probably just shook them.
It probably did.
And
for those guys who are new to playing Alabama for probably first time at Kyle Field, it shook them up. Yeah.
For Young, I mean, he's a freshman quarterback, and he goes into Kyle Field where everybody is just organized yelling at all times. Yes. And it's not just yelling. They have, chants that they go over before the game.
Yeah.
And, they're very coordinated with that kind of stuff. And this isn't a Texas A&M podcast, but they are crazy down there in College Station.
Crazy.
So
they're built different.
To say that Alabama wouldn't beat Texas A&M 9 out of 10 times, I think you're kidding yourself.
And I think too for Alabama, the crazy part is they got to win out though, because if they lose, if they get another hiccup, lose to Georgia, they're not going to the playoff. Mm-hmm. That's happening.
Yeah.
So they got to win out, and obviously they can do it. They've done it before, but they cannot have any more hiccups. Whether it's to now Georgia, if they lost to that, understandable, but they still got LSU, Auburn, Iron Bowl. Not saying they, Auburn knows Alabama, still gonna be a tough game. So they've got some, SEC, anybody can be anybody. It's just going to happen. So they've definitely got to, they cannot have another A&M game. They have no room for error anymore. They had one room for error, and now it's gone. They cannot lose again. So I will be interested to see how they play the rest of this season.
Yeah, and I would be, I'll keep it brief. My final thought, I would be shocked if they did lose another game.
I will agree.
Except for maybe Georgia.
Before Georgia.
Georgia is a very, very good football team. So you can't really... you can't really, I guess, say like Bama's having a down year if they lose to Georgia, because that's
No,
definitely not the
Georgia's
case.
good.
Bama, I think you can officially say they're having a down year if they lose to LSU, if they lose to Auburn, if they lose to Arkansas, if they lose to Tennessee, stuff like that. No,
crazy. We're getting craziness now.
Now we're getting into crazy territory, but that's my thought on Bama. They're a wagon. They always will be a wagon. You can't count them out. Yep.
Yeah.
Can't.
I feel the exact same way, especially with Nick Saban at the helm. I mean, you can never count them out. I was looking at his college football reference. At Alabama, 15 years, 176-24. That shocks me every time. 14-5 in bowl games. As you mentioned, 8 national championships. He's had a number 1 overall team at some point in every season he's been at Alabama. I mean, if there's anybody that in the midst of a down year, and you can't see why I'm doing finger quotes there, in a down year that can right the ship just from a coaching standpoint and carry his team back to maybe even the college football playoffs, it's Nick Saban in Alabama. Yeah. And as you put it earlier, I mean, he's inevitable. We mentioned Thanos, but I mean, just I would never count out Nick Saban in Alabama, even in the middle of a down year like this.
Yeah.
So we're running a bit long, but I do want to kind of close. Well, I guess I should say Tennessee Alabama kicks off at 7 p.m. in Alabama. We're going to be there, so I'm excited for that.
Ooh,
first.
Not lucky you guys. I will say, I was there in 2009.
Yeah.
Electric.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm genuinely excited to go to Alabama, Bryant-Denny Stadium, obviously.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the inspiration for the lights came from.
Yeah.
Whisper, whisper, don't say that.
Whisper,
that we
whisper.
took it from Alabama. But we took it from Alabama.
Yeah, Bryant-Denny is obviously that game that I went to, tough game, but the environment, the atmosphere in Bryant-Denny, incredible. You are going to have so much fun.
Yeah, so I think just before we move into our final topic of the day, I think we should just give predictions. I mean, I feel like that's a good idea. And I mean, I feel like everyone listening knows where this is going.
Oh yeah,
But Riley, let's start it off.
Is there a final spread? Is it 24-25?
They opened at 29, I believe, but I'm not sure where it's sitting this moment.
Before I make my final prediction, because for our degenerate gamblers out there, you might want to know what the spread is. Let's see. I mean, it probably is that, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it will be. I will be shocked if Tennessee stays within 3 or 4 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just being real. Our depth issues, quarterback play. If we're playing Milton or Bailey against that Nick Saban coach team, it's going to be a struggle. In Bryant-Denny Stadium, let's just put it how it is. Tennessee just needs to get through this week healthy as possible and get into the bye week and focus on the last 4 games of the season. I think Tennessee will lose. Let me look up the spread real quick. It's not going to be pretty.
While Riley's doing that, I'll go ahead and give my prediction. I think this is going to be one of the most inspired 3 touchdown losses you will see from Tennessee in a while. Obviously, I think it's going to be Bama. You got them at home. If you have them in Knoxville, I don't know, maybe you give them a little tussle and you have it, 7-point game at the last little bit. I can kind of see that. But if you're in Bryant-Denny, that elite atmosphere, you got them just coming off a loss a little bit ago to Texas A&M. Alabama is not on track to lose right now. They're in that winning mentality. They know what's on the table. They can't lose anymore. And I think there's going to be an inspired performance from both sides. I think Tennessee's going to come out and compete. I think it's going to be pretty close at first. I think first half we could be talking about a 7-point game going into halftime. But I'm going to say I'll say Alabama 38, Tennessee 20, 19-21, something like that. I think it'll be semi-respectable, but I don't think it's going to be a Tennessee win. Josh, how about you?
I guess I'm leaning quite the other way, just in the spirit of consistency with what I put in our weekly newspaper, which came out Wednesday. So you should definitely pick that up. They're in the orange racks outside buildings on campus. I had Alabama 49-14. Maybe that's closer than what it's been, or maybe I'm not giving Tennessee enough credit. Yeah. Who knows? But with Hendon Hooker out and with Joe Milton in, and I'm sure Joe Milton's a great guy, but I think Tennessee will be lucky to score 2 to 3 touchdowns. Yeah. I'm sorry. I know Heupel has kind of turned his program around, and they're definitely heading in the right direction. But we're 7 games in, 8 games in. I guess this will be. I just don't think on a pure talent level Tennessee is there. So I think this might be a bit of a rough Saturday. I don't know if I'm as optimistic as maybe you guys are sounding.
Yeah, I think honestly, like what Ethan said, I could see the score being similar to Florida.
Yeah.
Like we play, like Tennessee plays really well in the first half, and then second half, like Florida kind of just overtook Tennessee. Alabama will probably do the same. So the spread right now, according to Sportsbook Wire USA Today, Tennessee is underdog by 27.5 points. So I'll go. I like that spread for Tennessee. That's a big number. That is huge. I will still say Bama beats Tennessee pretty convincingly, but I like the spread personally. So I like Alabama 45. I'll go Tennessee 20. Like I say, good teams win. Great teams cover.
Yeah, that's I think that's got some truth to it for sure. I think
45-20 sounds pretty reasonable.
Tennessee has a chance to get it within 20. I think that's doable,
well.
but I think anything more than 17, like I said, 31-21, and that's even stretching it. That's me being optimistic. That's me trying to, but
pump some good stuff into the veins.
My first thing, if I was being consistent like Josh, and mine kind of changes as it goes along. Yeah. My first instinct was 52-14 Alabama, and so
off a recency bias.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously,
and I can definitely still see it happening, but Josh?
Yeah, so that, like I said, 7 p.m. Saturday evening. It's on ESPN. We'll have coverage on UTDailyBeacon.com. As we close, as if this past weekend hasn't been chaotic and hectic enough for Tennessee. Last night, pretty bombshell report, whatever you want to call it, about the Jeremy Pruitt firing and the lawsuit that he has. And I don't want to get into it too much. We are running long, but there's a lot of legalese in that, and we don't want to mess up something there. But the gist of it is Jeremy Pruitt was fired for cause back in January for recruiting violations, and with that, Tennessee didn't have to pay Pruitt the buyout, which was $12.6 million. Mm-hmm. And so he's suing for a settlement. I don't know if he's going to take if he wants all of it, or if he'll take, a little bit less, but he's suing them. And last night it was reported that his lawyer has given the university an ultimatum by October 29th. They reach a settlement, or let's see, he's got, I can't get the wording, but basically it's a report, and he's just going to name a bunch of people and instances where the University of Tennessee has had past recruitment violations and such. And this is what the lawyer said. This is a quote: "It will cripple UT's athletic program for years."
Yeah. So
that's obviously a big report. I mean, there's a lot of names mentioned. It goes back as far as Butch Jones, Willie Martinez, who I think he's with Tennessee again right now as an assistant. He mentioned Rick Barnes, Donnie Plowman, Philip Fulmer from his time as athletic director. So there's a lot of names, a lot of big names in this. And, I mean, if it's true, that definitely would cripple UT's athletic program for years. And I don't want to speculate or anything, but it seems a bit to me like they're just calling a bluff, trying to get that payment. In my mind, when you name people, and I've never covered the Tennessee basketball beat before. This will be my first time this year, so I can't say that I even know Rick Barnes. But if you're going to call out somebody for their reputation and for cheating and whatever it might be, Rick Barnes is not the person to do so. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a deacon, a reverend, right? I mean, like his reputation, I think, speaks for himself. And he responded, Fulmer responded, and they basically said, Jeremy Pruitt's in the situation he is now because of the choices he made. Yeah. Rick Barnes was like, I welcome you to come search. I've got too much respect for the university. So there's a lot of back and forth. Like it's early. I mean, on the day we're recording this, it's the 20th, so there's still 9 days out. Yeah. So there'll be more news to come on this, but right now it seems like maybe Pruitt's just trying to bluff for somebody.
Yeah, like Josh said, this is a developing story. When you listen to this, there might be more information, but I don't know. I want to keep it brief as well because I'm just not too versed in this stuff. But, he's calling out several people. Bobby Mays, Willie Martinez were included. Obviously, you got Rick Barnes. Obviously, you got Butch Jones from previous administrations. And, this just – they even said, like, a quote verbatim was "We're not bluffing," which very much sounds like somebody that's bluffing to me. And like I said, I don't want to speculate either because I just don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to the legal side of things. But Rick Barnes is not the guy I would go after. No. And if by some miracle that Pruitt is being truthful and his lawyer is being truthful and they really have this information, this is pretty significant stuff. This would not only get a guy like Rick Barnes either expelled or fired, suspended, whatever the word you want to use. It would get a lot of people at Tennessee fired, and it would kind of derail them for a while. And that was me speculating 100%. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think it's more likely that this is just them trying to reach a settlement. This is Pruitt trying to make some quick money because he got wronged, or he feels like he got wronged by the University of Tennessee.
I mean, just to get over with it, if Tennessee wants to, just give him some money. Don't give him the 12.6. Just give him whatever you feel like giving him comfortably, and just move on. Yeah. There's no point in this. Like you said, he's probably bluffing. We don't know. Would they really want to have to go? I'm not saying when they would pay their lawyers, pay whatever, would cost as much as they would just pay Pruitt, but do they really want to go through the hassle, the legal trouble of all this stuff? I mean, I wouldn't personally. So in my opinion, just to get over with, just pay Pruitt, whatever. Don't pay him the 12. Just try and find a lower settlement, just move on and forget, and just put this behind us. There's no point for him to call anybody out like this. It's just pointless. This makes you look bad. Yeah. At this point, public enemy number 1 now at Knoxville.
I recommend reading the original article. I think it was broken by Blake Toffenmeyer. Great read.
Knox News Sentinel, fantastic.
Yeah, great read. Very interesting stuff. Kind of going more into the legal stuff. When I read it, I felt like I knew what I was talking about. I obviously don't. There's a lot of fancy words that I did not go to law school for, but there's a reason I'm in JEM.
We'll see what happens.
Very interesting stuff nonetheless. Get your popcorn ready because there's some interesting things that are going to come out one way or another. But
we'll have coverage of that UT Daily Beacon as well as more news develops. But I think that's going to do it for this second episode of the Checkerboard Chat of, I guess, the 2021 season.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening. We'll be back at it next week to talk Alabama and bye week, and I guess we'll probably get into some basketball previews.
Sweet.
Maybe. So we got a lot of good stuff coming. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
See y'all.
See you guys.